aspects of my work and never look at the economic part. And this is the first time I'm actually putting that together and presenting, though it has slightly deeper into what Vijay sir has just presented. He gave an overview, I'm going deep into it, and I'll be discussing about crop-livestock systems and the sustainability transitions, and I'm looking at, and I put together an alternative policy framework which we could do. So the outline of my presentation is, first I'd like to set the context in which this research was based, because this is very critical for sustainability. I would share a bit on the methods, because it's very important. The kinds are very complex and they have many layers and a lot of social and interaction between social and science. So the methodology of understanding how systems are, what trajectories they take, why certain pathways come up was also critical. I'll highlight a few research highlights, but focusing more on the transitions and sustainability part. I'll bring about a little bit of gaps in policy that hinder sustainability transitions, and then coming to the alternative framework. So the context in which my research was embedded, I took a very dry lens because the understanding I have is dry lands cannot be equated with other regions given their unique biophysical disposition, and this is what determines sustainability. The second thing is, 69% of India is classified as dry lands, but we don't look at it specifically, and it's also a predominant land type across developing countries and divided by poor. So therefore, we need to look at agriculture from a very different lens if you look at sustainability. Now, there's a lot of literature which focuses on, which takes the dry lands angle and also explains the ill effects of irrigating too much of crop production in that area. It also talks about how farming systems evolved. Almost 3 decades of literature is there on this. There's also literature on traditional knowledge systems in these regions, but for some reason these are not taken into consideration when policy is formulated. So I explored looking at transition and crop-livestock systems in an area in Telangana. I took 2 watersheds and I took almost 50% sample of it. So the sample size was pretty large, 3,000 households. And I looked at 4 aspects. I looked at how transitions happen in each region, what were the drivers of change, what are the and then I did farming systems typology and looked at the economic performance of these new systems. I looked at how sustainable are these new farming systems, specifically in terms of water use. And then lastly, I looked at how vulnerable these current farming systems are to climate change. So what I want to highlight here is I had to use multiple methods to figure out what is exactly happening in that region, because if you take a science approach or a social approach, you don't get the whole picture. And for understanding agricultural transitions, there are too many overlaps and interconnections. So I started with timeline mapping exercises. I went into a longitudinal study, household surveys, FGDs with multiple age groups, people, women, ethnic groups. And then I also had to look at secondary data, GIS studies, and statistical tests to triangulate. And then at the end, I pitched it from the watershed hydrology perspective to get this sort of, to understand what exactly is happening from a sustainability end. Now there are multiple drivers of change for an area to change in agriculture systems. But there were five very striking drivers of change which actually caused a rapid transition in the region. One is village electrification, borewell technology, irrigation infrastructure, promotion of hybrid crops, improved seeds and things like that. Exotic livestock species were introduced. Market demand for only certain products was very high, and then development programs in which watersheds played the largest role in transitioning or changing how systems were in this dry land region. Now, what happened was earlier when I did a 30-year timeline mapping, and you can see that from 1997 to 2015. Predominantly the farming system was a mixed farming system where you had crop and livestock integration was high, there was circularity in the farming systems within the village, within the farmers, things, but then over time you could see that specialization and intensification happened, and I kind of found 5 farming systems. So one, it transitioned into 5. But in the 5, only 3 were very predominant in the region, and you can also see this in other regions of India. Similar transitions are happening, depending upon the remoteness of where the villages are located. So the three predominant systems were crop dairy system, only crop system without any livestock, and then you have crop and small ruminant systems. Now, one thing when you do it, when you look at intensification, you expect that food output increases and simultaneously incomes also increase. But food did increase, food output in the region did increase. But when you look at the economic performance, the gross margin from the crop system was very low. In the crop dairy system, the gross margin was very highly variable. I mean, some farmers were doing well, some farmers were not. And you could not really pinpoint what the reasons were and what the factors were. The production costs were very high and there was high reliance on money. But when you looked at the crop and small ruminant system, it had the highest gross margin, and the factor which was playing there was it was a very integrated system. There was a lot of integration between crop and livestock. Now, when you looked at the environmental angle and I looked at only water, though the crop system used the least amount of water, that is because they were only cropping for one season and not for 3 seasons. If they were cropping for 3 seasons, then automatically their water usage would be high. The highest water usage was in the crop dairy system, and the moderate water usage was in the crop small ruminant system. Now, from the social perspective, there was quite a bit of development where you could see that all lower caste groups had moved up the livestock ladder, gained assets, and things like that. That's the positive part of it. But if you look where they are placed, most of them are placed either in the crop system or the crop dairy system, and both were highly vulnerable to climate change because the intensification and specialization in these was more. So it's not just enough to just give them land or give them assets. It's more about how integrated the system is. Now the third system was dominated by a specific ethnic group because they were local traditional livestock keepers in the area. They're called the Golla community. And because they had high levels of traditional knowledge and also higher level of integration between crop and livestock, they showed the lowest vulnerability to climate change. Now, one of the striking things that happened in the region, which actually from where sustainability angle comes up, is there were significant changes in land use and land cover in the region. So if you look, wastelands, fallow lands, water bodies completely almost disappeared. So the one in brown color are the wastelands. And then by the time you see the land use land cover here, it's all agricultural land. So this change in land use is what was the first thing to trigger and is linked to water resources in the region and linked to many other issues. So now other implications of sustainability here. The minute you start intensifying and specializing in farming, the circularity within the farming system and within the region also go away, and this is what causes high risk in various. The diversified income is gone, biodiversity loss is there, allied livelihoods are lost because you're only focusing on one product and one. Then the land use changes in land use limit groundwater infiltration because there are no more common lands or no more forest regions or other things, and there's only one type of land type there, and therefore it limits. And then you are also extracting a lot of groundwater, so there is overutilization of water resources. Land holdings over a period of time also get smaller due to land fragmentation and other things. So if you compare this small land holdings in dryland regions, they are not as lucrative as you compare them to other. So just giving land for agriculture may not be also the right way. We have to think of other alternate sources. And because of specialization, there was also a reduction in the diversity of the food basket, higher workload for women, and a range of other social issues. So, critical gaps in policy, when I looked at why these things were happening or why certain transition, because policy is well intended, but then once it starts rolling out in the field, you start seeing from the short term onwards. In the long term, you start seeing gaps, and you don't, and there are unintended consequences. So the first thing that came up was policy incoherence. So both within the sector and both between sectors, the policies are not aligned. There are multiple objectives, and we always are, kind of have a challenge to whether we meet development needs or whether we take up sustainability. So India is in that kind of state where it has to deal with both. And when you have to deal with both, there's a lack of coordination between different schemes and different programs and between sectors. You end up with these kind of contradicting, consequences at the field level. So then the second one is counterproductive program design. So though integrated watershed development, I personally like the way the design of the route is. But if you look at it from a dry lens perspective, there are two components which are counterproductive to each other. One is the soil and moisture conservation work. You are trying to save water, increase water in the region, but the agriculture component pushes intensification. So the minute the both come together, you have this kind of result. So you need to see that for which region, what kind of agriculture interventions need to be pushed through an integrated program, because that is then you will start finding results, and therefore most of the results are short term and not long. You only find the repercussions coming after a longer period. Now there's also no interface for the right kind of knowledge exchange, like Vijay sir was saying. So the kind of alternate policy framework or maybe suggestions for policy are that we need to strengthen the science policy interface first, because we need to, there are a lot of knowledge gaps and the application of the right kind of scientific knowledge is not yet being translated into program design. One of the examples I can give here is we do climate modeling. We are looking at how runoff is happening. We're looking at where climate modeling clearly shows that high intensity rainfall in short periods is what is going to happen. But the watershed design hasn't transitioned to actually capture that kind of runoff or shift in rainfall. So unless there's a link between science and policy, the program design doesn't change. So then we also have to improve the monitoring and evaluation mechanisms for feedback mechanisms. We don't have any feedback. We do a program, we finish it, we leave it. There is no internal mechanism for policy change to happen for continuous process improvement. Therefore, because there is no feedback mechanism, the research agenda is also on its own. I mean, we don't drive the research agenda for impact. And then we also don't have cross-sectoral integration. When you want to transition from what we are right now doing to more something more sustainable, there's always a gap period where farmers need support. And when farmers need support, you need to change the kind of investments right now are not there. And also the minimum support prices. These are only for specific crops which are again water intensive and not suited to the agricultural, not suited to India's dryland terrain. So we need to change those. And the last would be mainstreaming community-led resource management. Over here, there are several CSOs who have actually produced very good digital tools, but these are remaining with the organizations. They are not mainstreamed or they are not kind of plugged into rural management programs which are already there, like new rural livelihood mission. So FES has a range of tools, WASN has a range of tools, WOTR has a range of tools. These are all simple digital tools which can be plugged in and communities can use them on their own. But these remain as, they remain with these CSOs and are not being mainstream. So this is what I mean. So if we connect these three gaps, and I think something which Dr. Ben, I don't know how to pronounce your name, but the presentation of yesterday, I think this is something which I learned yesterday is about open innovation and where we can co-create policy. Thank you.
Long live India and France friendship.